Gamebreaker TV.
Hello, everybody! Welcome back. This is Gamebreaker.tv. I'm Gary Gannon, and this is GuildCast, the first GuildCast of 2012. Happy New Year, everybody! Woohoo! All is still quiet on the ArenaNet front, but I'm sure they're preparing something amazing. I just know it. They're just working on it, just for the show, just for us to have something to talk about. In the meantime, back by popular demand, and because there's no news. Nothing to do with because there's no news. Nothing to do with because there's no news. Back by popular demand. That's right, your viewer questions. All right, first from Massively.com. Community manager in charge is Ruby Bear. How are you, Ruby?
Good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Good to be back here again.
Yay.
And joining us, of course, Massively.com's editor-in-chief and pro beard. I don't know, pro beard. That's it. Just pro beard. He's pro beard.
Pro beard.
He is pro beard. Missed my pro beard last week. I saved it for you, and you didn't come on the show. Too bad. Man. I'll have to do that again one of these days. Who knows? All right, so let's do some viewer questions again. You guys have tons and tons and tons of questions. Now we got Sean on the show, so we got a whole new thing. All right, so first up, Trey Price says he's wondering. Guild Wars 2 seems to paint the picture of having a persistent, non-instance world with changing environments and quests. Do you think this will throw the current theme park MMO base off guard? Sean, go.
Well, first of all, they will have instances, right? I mean, that's one of the big things because it makes it sound. I'm not. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but it makes it sound like he's saying that they're only going to have a persistent world.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, he does make it. It's sort of worded like that with the word non-instance.
Yeah, I mean, they are going to have an instanced for each person's storyline. Actually, if you play SOTOR, you get kind of a good feeling of what that's like. You have your own storyline instanced. Whenever you're in a group, that group goes with the team leader's storyline. Again, kind of like SOTOR. So, wait, this is GuildCast, right?
It is GuildCast.
You've been playing.
You just been playing a little bit of Star Wars there.
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to be, completely persistent, although it's going to be a lot more persistent than Guild Wars 1. That's for sure. So I don't think it's really going to break anything.
I think, yeah, so what about, I mean, do you really view Guild Wars 2 as a complete non-theme park MMO? Because I sort of don't.
I think it's going to be less theme parky. I don't think there's going to be as much hand-holding. I think maybe Trey's concern here is not having a dedicated quest line that says, here's what you do now, okay, this takes you to the next part, and here's what you do next. And I kind of share his wondering if some people won't be standing around in towns going, I don't know what to do next.
What do I do?
I don't know, where's the next primary quest? Where's the next mission? So that may be a thing until people figure out we can really go wherever we want and do whatever we want.
You're not gonna get you mean you're not gonna get banned for going to some planet? No, that's not gonna happen.
Oh, ouch!
Again with the SOTOR.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting way. I guess I think I'm sure that they've looked at this, and I haven't really seen too much as far as how your quest log is sort of set up in Guild Wars 2. But I would almost imagine that there's going to be some way in your quest log to kind of guide you and sort of point you in the right direction to say, hey, this is your class quest, you should go off in this direction for that, these are your side quests, and kind of at least give you some direction. I mean, it is a little bit more open, but also saying, talking about throwing off the current theme park MMO base, it's not like it's a sandbox. I mean, this isn't EVE Online at all. So I don't think it's going to be so off the mark that like current MMO players coming from, say, WoW or Tor or something are going to be completely lost. I think it's going to be, I mean, from what I've seen, it's probably going to be pretty intuitive to an MMO vet.
I think so.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's not going to be something like Worm Online where you have to make the wood, to make the handle, to make the axe, to cut down more wood. It's not going to be something as insane as that. From what we've seen so far, even in demos, you look at the creatures in the game and they're highlighted in red. It seems like they're not afraid to kind of show you the way, and that goes hand in hand with quests as well. So I don't think it's going to be as linear as even Guild Wars 1 is.
Right.
Where you can't jump off 3-foot cliffs, but it's going to be a little bit more open. It's kind of like a compromise between what we're used to in a lot more open world, not quite a sandbox, but a more open world, and the linearness of Guild Wars 1.
That actually was something that kind of bugged me a little bit about. And again, I didn't play as much Guild Wars 1 as you guys did, but one of the things that did kind of bug me a little bit was how I felt I was always on a path, and I couldn't jump off, and it was weird for me that it was being, it wasn't MMO it was a hybrid-y MMO, like it was doing things different, but it was kind of weird for me that I was like on these, on these cliffs or something, and I just couldn't jump off of that because I'm so used to that. I don't know. Let's do the next question. All right. Dexter Miguel wants to know, says, will we be able to dye our armor black? It's very important.
It is important.
Obviously wants to be Darth Vader.
I need Darth Vader running around Tyria. That's what I want to see.
Don't you?
How awesome would that be? Actually, this is a cool question because the answer is more than just yes. And yes, you can. You absolutely can. But last year, they posted this big thing, and actually on Massively, we talked to Kristen Perry about the dye system. The dye system, if you're familiar with Guild Wars 1, you get like dye drops, and you get a little bottle, and one bottle will do one piece of armor. And it's kind of a storage nightmare. Guild Wars 2, they're going to have over 400 different dye colors, but the way it works, it's not physical bottles of dye, and I know that's pretty common in a lot of games. But you actually unlock color families and color sets in Guild Wars 2, and you don't have any physical items to dye your armor with. You just open your armor panel, and you have this choice from your palette of what you can do.
That's interesting. Have we seen that before?
Very cool. I don't know. Has there been something like this? Not that
I don't know. I think there are some free-to-play games that are similar to that with the unlocks, but nothing as in depth as this.
Sounds a lot more, like you said, it gets rid of the inventory nightmare. That's first of all, so that's really good. And it sounds like it could probably give you a lot more flexibility over the course of the game with unlocks and stuff like that.
I think it really does. I'm kind of personally very excited about the dye system because that's just something that I like. And I actually saw in chat somebody was like, 400? Yeah. And seriously, she did say there are over 400 colors. And what's very cool, the way the color applies changes according to the fabric or what your armor is made of. If you have metal armor and you just put like a straight red, it's going to look different than if you have leather armor or cloth armor.
Wow, it's that granular, huh? That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, she's really, she just put so much in there.
Now, how about secondary colors, things like that? Is there any more info on exactly how that's all working?
I can't remember. I know that each piece of armor has more than one dye channel.
Yeah.
So you could do like your shirt. You could do shirts. I can't remember. Have like 3 dye channels.
I don't remember the specific numbers, but she did mention that different pieces have different, like you said, a different number of channels on each one.
Do you know?
So you could have like a blue shirt with black sleeves, or I don't know. I'm just pulling that out of my ear, but.
Is there any sort of restrictions at all to kind of keep the balance of dye? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, we obviously, if you leave the system completely open, we're going to have people running around looking completely ridiculous with like, a purple arm and a pink arm and like some sparkly pants and like things like. Is there any kind of system in place that actually kind of pushes you away from that? So is there any sort of like color matching system, or is it just free for all? If you want to look like a complete idiot, go for it.
I think if you want to look like the Wiggles threw up on you, you are more than welcome to.
Nice.
I don't think there's like, wouldn't that be great to have the fashion police running around?
Oh, guild name.
I would love that.
Guild name,
Fashion
Police. But it almost seems like, it seems like, I wondered because it seems like, this might be the type of game they might slightly restrict that to keep everything kind of looking cohesive in the world for other players who are, just don't want to see that kind of ridiculousness. They want kind of the world to just feel kind of like a whole entire world in a living, breathing kind of real place.
Well, actually, it's funny you say that because they have put restrictions in place like that with character creation. I mean, you can't make circus freaks. They have their limitations to what kind of character, what you can do, and how far off the regular beaten path you can stray with character creation. They want to, you're kind of restricted to the look of the world, but apparently with your clothing, you can just look as ridiculous and colorful as you want. And I think if you play Guild Wars 1, everybody has seen like a rainbow armored warrior. So it's a thing. It's gonna
Sean just
remain
wants a
thing.
beard and a Slayer shirt, and he'll be happy.
Seriously,
You
that's
can
all I
have
want.
beards. Have you seen the beards in Guild Wars 2?
No.
Yes.
Hey, I should do a feature on beards and
Beards.
MMOs.
Yeah, there you go. There's an article right there coming this week. Watch massively.
Daily grind.
There you
Dibs.
go. All right. Ante Reyes has some questions about the Guardian's role in the game. This is really interesting, I thought. He says, ArenaNet said that they're trying to break the Trinity, but at the same time, they make the Guardian class, in which they clearly state on their site, and he quotes saying, he or she, I think it's a he, I'll guard you. Let them come through me first. I don't know if that's just me. That's end quote. He says, I don't know if that's just me, but clearly Guardian class seems to be the tanking class. I think that was interesting because that is really true. I mean, they've really been kind of touting the non-Trinity system, and he is saying, I'm going to guard you, let them come through me first. And that means, like, you're in the front line, I'm standing in front of you, I'm the tank, you got to get through me. To some extent, doesn't it?
Well, I think maybe they're reading too much into that. People want so badly to wedge these characters into the Holy Trinity. And I have said this so many times that I'm like a broken record, but I think once you get in there and get your hands on the characters, you're going to realize that it doesn't really work like that. And actually, we have so many of the Guardian skills that we already know. It's not so much a tanky role. I mean, if you have to wedge it into something, it's maybe a little more protective. One of the skills that I was looking at, and I forget the name now, but it lays a circle down on the ground that simultaneously heals your allies and sets your enemies on fire. And that's
how do
sort
you
of skill
define-
just by...
How do you define
sorry?
that? How do you define
well,
that?
You can't, but just by its functionality, that says that your allies are going to be up on the front line with the enemies, which kind of goes in the opposite direction as a tanking functionality.
Yeah. I see the Guardian as more of a party buffer, and also a little bit crowd control, but I don't really see it that. I mean, I guess when you look at the heavy armor and you look at the shielding effects and everything, it's kind of natural to assign a tank label to it. And this is, like Ruby mentioned, and we've said before, that it's going to be pretty inevitable for people to, to assign those roles, even when they say that they're not there. But personally, I just think the Guardian is not as simple as just being, that one role, because there's so many other things you can do with it.
What are some of those things? What are some of those things that how does it totally differ from?
Well, like Ruby said, you lay down the symbols, and they can buff the party and simultaneously, debuff or harm the enemies. And each class is also going to have their own healing abilities, because they took out the dedicated healer. Plus, the weapons themselves will all have different skills depending on what weapon you have and what class you play.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be it's just going to be a bigger variety than just holding aggro.
I think
just building a wall.
one of the biggest questions I have, and I think we brought this up before, is how is armor going to work? Like what that's really going to be, because that's a big defining role in sort of how people will, even if there is no Trinity, how humans will naturally sort of break up the roles in a group, right? I mean, are Guardians going to have heavy armor that can take massive amounts of damage when others can't, or are they all going to be equal? Like,
I don't think we have numbers on armor level yet, do we?
No, I don't think we do. I don't think that's something that that they're concentrating on. I'm not sure.
Do you think? I mean, could it? Dare I say, could it possibly be like purely cosmetic?
I don't know. That's a good question. Ruby, do you know?
You're muted.
Oh.
Muted.
I keep leaning on that button. Sorry. They've made a big deal out of the heavy armor, light armor, medium armor. I mean, they've really put those delineations up there. So I think there's something there. We just don't know what it is yet.
Love to hear that. Because that actually that little bit of information would actually say a whole lot about this whole system, right? Like, do all the classes have, even if they do have armor ratings and actual they do actually absorb. Are they just the same across the entire board? Just like dependent sort of like where you're at on a level, like, and no one's armor is any better than others. So if you're a thief, it's the same as if you're a guardian.
Oh, I can't imagine it would be, just because they've made a point of making that distinction.
It doesn't make sense, but then I don't understand. Like I still, and when it ties into the Holy Trinity, that's where I get all confused and I get like, how's that gonna work? It doesn't make sense to me. Like if he's got heavy armor, he's gonna be the tank, right? Like that's I don't know.
See, it's like we're sitting here. It's like we're zealots trying to talk about the afterlife. We don't know what it's going to be like. We can only speculate. Guild Wars 2 is the afterlife. There it is.
Oh, man, you know what will clear these questions up, right?
News.
Watch.
Play the thing in our home.
How about news?
Yes.
How about ArenaNet just release some news, please? Release some news.
Well, you know what? They did have very big news today.
Plushie.
The Char plushies are back in stock. That was like the big news.
We could have done
That
a
was what I
news.
sat here for 4 days going, they're working on something.
We could have done a
That was
news hit.
definitely
It would have been
it.
Char plushies back in the store. Go get them.
Yeah, let's do an hour on that.
But actually, thanks to ArenaNet for tweeting us today. That was very nice. Very kind of you. That was very kind.
Yeah, thank you guys.
All right, let's do next question. Bring 'em Miles Magnusons. Man, the names we get on this show are just fantastic.
I know, right?
Bring 'em Miles Magnusons. All right, he asks, what do you think about the game not having any traditional raids, especially considering that raids seem to be the standard for MMO development these days? Really quickly, Ruby, why don't you fill me in really quick? Just a lot of new viewers out there, probably from Gamebreaker, don't know what's going on with Guild Wars 2, maybe not following it. Explain to me, like, you say not having traditional raids, so give me the raid background first for Guild Wars 2.
Well, you have 5-man dungeons, so that's your instance right there. I'm going to kind of lean back on what one of the devs said recently. He said, we want our entire game to be the end game. It's not, you don't work and level to 80 to go raiding. I mean, it's like raid level stuff the whole way through. Just level appropriate.
And
so.
see, when you say that, I get all giddy because, like, I hate the fact that
know.
almost all these other MMOs, you play up until that point, and then the game just changes. It's like, oh, you played this game for X number of weeks, and now we'll have a new game for you. It's called raiding, and it's called get 20 or 40 or 100,000 of your friends, like, and coordinate all this stuff. But I gotta say, how are they gonna do it? Is that just like, PR speak? Hey, we'll just say this. It sounds amazing. 'Cause it sounds great.
What, that there's no raids, or that we want the whole thing to be end game?
Yeah, the whole game is going to be the end game. I mean, it sounds awesome, but what does it mean?
Well, you come out of character creation, and you run around a little bit. Within 10 minutes out of character creation, you're in an epic battle with a huge boss. So, and I've
okay, but
played that.
how different is that than a
creative.
dynamic event or something in Rift? I did that in Rift, right? Like, I mean, I didn't even get out of the starting area, and I had a huge rift, and I was like, fighting a boss mob. Okay, so how different? But that to me wasn't endgame.
No, I'm trying to think back now. I'm like, man, what was that like? Okay, I got to go back. You know what? I'm going to go create a character in Rift so I can remember, and I'll be back in like 10 minutes. I don't know. I don't remember. Rift did not leave a giant impression on me. I don't know. Sean, what about you?
Yeah, I also didn't play very long. Actually, I don't usually play games until once you get to that point where you start raiding. That's usually when I make an alt or something.
Well,
That's why I'm excited about it.
Well, what do we know about sort of there is no end game or there is no traditional raid? So what is there for the player looking for the end game, or is there just nothing to look for at that point? Like, you have to just not look for whatever the level cap is, like say 50. It's just like throw that out of your mind. It doesn't matter. Like, don't race to get to 50 because when you get to 50, it's still just the same game. Is that the point?
Well, the level cap actually is 80, not 50, because I know somebody's going to, if we don't correct that, somebody's going to catch us. But I don't think it's just that it's boring, the whole thing. I guess if you had to say something, you would say that the dynamic event system is what has replaced raiding. And the dynamic event system, for those who aren't familiar with it, is that you have an actual impact on the world according to your gameplay. And it's not just like a little instanced thing. And of course now I'm like blanking on examples. You go to a village, and they're saying, hey, this centaur chieftain and his mob and his big army are invading our village, and we need your help. Actually, I'm going to replace that with pirates, because that's actually when I played. This little kid like comes running up to you and says these pirates are invading our village, and please come help. And you have to actually get in there, and they're setting fire to everything, so you're trying to kill pirates and grab buckets and put out fires. If you don't go in there and do it, the village actually is raided and looted and pillaged and burned to the ground, and it's gone. I mean, that's everyday stuff in Guild Wars 2, and I think that's what replaces traditional raiding.
That's everyday stuff, sure. That's what I think, and the only reason I'm asking all these questions because I think there's a lot of people out there who don't know much about Guild Wars who are this is new stuff, right? So it's a little confusing, and it's like, especially like this question asks, I think is really relevant because there is such a it's like in the MMO community especially, we have like, it seems like we have like almost 3 groups of people. We have people that kind of play somewhat casually, don't really race to endgame. They might do some light raiding or something, but it's not too serious. You've got this other group of people who, the game is endgame raiding for them. They want to get to the max level, and that's where it starts for them. And then you've got this other section, of course, is where it's PvPers, and that's the game for them. So I guess from my point is like, if the type of player that's looking for that end game experience of doing massive groups with their friends, 3 nights a week or something, what do they have to look forward to, or are they confused? Like, how do they like kind of wrap their heads around that? What are they going to do when they get to max level? And is there like these mass groups of 20 or 40 people that you put together to do a group effort in the game?
Well, I don't think players are going to really enjoy Guild Wars until they get out of that mindset that you get in there and their goal is to grind levels as quickly as possible to get to endgame and get to the really good content. Because the really good content is right out of the gate. And I don't feel like it's a concept of if everything is epic and huge, then nothing is epic and huge because it's every day. Because you have there's just little side stuff that you can do. I think everybody that's familiar has heard the thing about you talk to the farmer and save his garden from marauding rabbits that are eating all of his watermelons. I mean, you've got stuff that's little like that, but then you have dynamic events that actually have like giant dragons and like the pillaged town.
So
but I think until they
go ahead.
I think until they get to this concept and get this through their heads that, okay, I can do raid style content now. I can do that at level 10. I can do that at level 20, level 25. I think they're going to miss out quite a bit because it just doesn't work like that.
Sean, let me ask you, because you're playing this other lightsaber game a bit, it seems, and I hate to make comparisons to it, but I'm going to ask, can we somewhat imagine it to some form like flashpoints in Star Wars: The Old Republic, where even at a low level you're getting these sort of group...
Hi, I'm Dave.
Hi, Dave.
I'm here to tell you why you want to play Guild Wars 2.
Thanks.
Really
I needed that.
We have another guest on the show.
Yeah, Dave. He's going to tell me how to play Guild Wars 2. I hate these. It's the YouTube playlist. They just start playing automatically. But can we think of it kind of like that? Are we going to like at a certain level sort of get these Flashpoint-esque scenarios that I'm going to need to group up with 2, 3, 4, 5 of my friends to go through?
Yeah, I imagine we will, and I imagine that it's going to start at a period in the game's progression where you're not going to have to feel like the game starts at level 50 or 80 or whatever. And I think one thing that people are going to have a hard time wrapping their heads around is actually something you mentioned earlier, where there are different types of goals that each person's going to have for their own end game. It's going to be somebody wants to craft, somebody wants to just finish their storyline, somebody wants to do 5-mans all day, somebody wants to do there's tons of PvP in the game also. There's world versus world versus world and all this stuff. So I mean, it's going to be kind of your own end game, how you want to make it. And I know a lot of games have said that before. We have a few in recent history that have tried to redefine the end game like this, and it's never really worked out. So I don't know. I think it gets kind of scary when ArenaNet talks about redefining all this stuff.
Sure,
it's like,
sure.
well, we have the stuff that's worked. Sure, there might be people bored of it already, but it's worked. And now you want to completely redesign it this way. I don't know. It's a retraining process, I think.
And also just how you just described it, I think for people is, you know what it is too. The scary part of it is for a lot of gamers, I think, is that they're not really telling us anything tangible, like except, you know, you can't say, well, there's WVW, so we understand on the PvP side. I get that. For PvPers, there's obviously some high level endgame stuff that you can keep doing if that's your gig. But I guess for other players out there who are used to hearing about, well, there's this dungeon and there's this dungeon and I'm going to take down this boss and this boss, and they know that stuff is really hard content. I think for a lot of them, not hearing about what that is, of what they're going to do at that level, some of them just might have questions in the back of their head going like, I want to make sure that there's something there for me to do when I get there, or am I going to get there, or am I going to be standing around? And maybe I don't want to craft, because that open-endedness almost sounds a bit like, well, you can, the way you described it, of you can make the end game whatever you want, sounds very sandboxy. Sounds almost like, oh, now it's EVE Online, but it's not.
It's like a sandbox. It's like a linear sandbox, or a sandbox of theme parks, or, you know what I mean? It has many different ways to get to that, you know, to whatever you want to do, but it's not completely open where you could just do whatever you want.
Actually, you know what? I thought of something, because I just glanced at chat and somebody said they saw something with like a big dragon in the water, and that actually reminded me. This is, I mean, if you have to define raid content, that's something that's almost as close as you're going to get. That big dragon in the water is Tequatl the Sunless, and that's indicated, I mean, you're just running around the world and you'll get a notice flashing across your screen that says new event nearby. And you can run over, and I actually tried to do this solo during a demo. I saw it and I thought, oh, this is cool, I get to fight Tequatl, and I went running over there. There just didn't happen to be any other players. Now in a live setting, you could put out a call in chat and say, hey, you know, Tequatl's up, I need help, everybody get over here. But it's such enormous content that there's no way, you can't do it by yourself. I tried.
And it's basically a dynamic event happening out in the open world as you just stumble upon it. So as you're just running around, like these things just happen, which we're used to in other MMOs where things happen, but now they're just happening on massive scales.
Much bigger scale, and that was in the level 40, 45 range. And it's triggered, it's not just random. I mean, it's triggered by a series of events that happen on the server in that area that players cause.
What about dungeons?
Pretty close to raid.
What about dungeons? Do we know anything about dungeons? Are there dungeon crawls?
Yeah, they are 5-man dungeons, which I actually do not love, just because I like big groups. I like my 8, my 12. But the 5-man dungeons are very, very impressive. You've got a couple of different modes. You have to complete it once. I'm afraid I'm going to get this backwards. You have to complete it once, like there's a specific goal, and it's almost like a giant Guild Wars 1 mission that you have to go in there and do. But then it's opened into story mode. There's story mode and explorable mode, and I'm afraid I'm getting them backwards. But then you go in that second one, and it's designed to be repeatable, where new corridors open up here and there, new things happen, new monsters come out, and you can explore quite a bit more, and it's harder. And there are quite a few of those.
Is that, dare I say, is that basically like their raiding, their dungeon crawls? I mean, like, it's just with a smaller group, it's 5?
Yeah, it's 5. Maybe it's a little raid.
Is it a mini raid?
They take a long time.
They have mini raids? It's
maybe
going
that's
to be,
just because I was bad at it.
It's going to be interesting, because I wonder if there's a lot of gamers out there. Actually, you know, this is a perfect time. Leave a comment below. I'd love to know if some of these questions kind of confuse the MMO crowd out there, maybe coming from another game or things like that. Do you have these concerns? Are you not concerned about it? What do you think? Like, are you looking towards Endgame? Does it concern you that you don't understand maybe exactly what the Endgame may be in Guild Wars 2? I'd like to know. Leave a comment below and tell us what you think. All right, next question. Brian Lim says, hey, Gary, Ruby, and Sean. I was just wondering if you think ArenaNet should have started its marketing campaign later so there would be a constant stream of updates as opposed to waves. I'm asking because since the long wait after a major update, I've been kind of burned out. Nothing short of an announcement of the release date is going to get me to jump out of my chair in excitement. So should they have waited actually later, do you guys think? I mean, I think they should just start giving us more information now, please. More, please. News. regular updates? Pick a day of the week, just put something out.
And I have to completely agree with Brian. I'm just coming off of like a huge burnout where I was just like, you know what, I'm not going to care about anything until you give me something that says I can play this game in my own home. I don't care what the circumstances are. But I mean, I'm right there with him. But like Sean was saying, I don't think they could have started it later.
Why?
No.
Why?
I mean, they first announced Guild Wars 2 to make up for the fact that they weren't going to have another chapter. Of course, they were having the chapter releases, Nightfall, and they went to Eye of the North, and then, well, not Eye of the North was after the announcement, but anyway, so at the time, people were waiting for what was supposed to be Utopia, which was going to be, the next chapter, and they said, you know what, we're not going to do chapters anymore. We're going to do a sequel, and we haven't really started doing that yet, so it's going to take a while. And it was kind of a bad, I mean, they were in a bad situation because they had to announce, that there wasn't going to be the next chapter, but also, just stick with us. We have a plan. We have something we're going to do, and it's going to be a lot better, and there's going to be jumping and all that. And and here they are. I mean, they were, what was that, 2007 when they announced that? I think it was May of 2007.
Yeah.
And here we are, many years later. I don't know. It takes a long time to make an MMO, and I think a lot of people forget that. And we weren't there at the beginning of SOTOR when they sat down and said, let's make a Star Wars: The Old Republic game into an MMO. If they would have announced it the day that they had a discussion saying that they wanted to make that into an MMO, people would go crazy. But they didn't. They announced it later when they had the pieces together and they knew what they were going to do. So ArenaNet was kind of in a bad situation to announce it so early. But here we are. We're almost at the end, so we should be thankful.
I mean, I think we're all probably a little bit biased because we're all like, great. We have a show about Guild Wars, massively writing about Guild Wars, But what do you think is? Again, I'm gonna get stabbed in the neck from this episode because I keep bringing up Star Wars. But talking about a marketing campaign, like the only one that comes to mind right now, which was really interesting, is I think before, Star Wars, we hadn't seen somebody so aggressively and so early start things like the Friday updates, where every Friday, I mean, we did. I don't even know, 70 episodes almost of the Republic show where we had a Friday update every single Friday with some piece of news. They did it for like over a year, almost 2 years or something. Do you think more MMO companies should start doing stuff like that though? I mean, not to be biased for Massively or for Gamebreaker. Yes, we're biased. Please give us news. We want to do a show. I'm really just prolonging this because we want news. But no, seriously, like, I mean, would it burn you out even more, Ruby? Like how you were saying that you're burnt out. Would it burn you out more, or would it be better that you just kind of had something to look forward to every week? Because I feel like there's a nugget of they could give you once a week. I mean, there's so much going on.
I feel like there should be something. And actually, an interesting point is that Martin Kirstein said recently that they have not started marketing Guild Wars 2. So this isn't even like the big hype, which just, I have no idea what they're even... I don't even know what to do with that. But he said very clearly that they haven't started marketing. So maybe once they start, technically marketing will get something every Friday or every, I don't know, Thursday. They seem to really love Thursday updates. But the way they're doing it now almost encourages burnout. And I feel like Sean said, they were kind of painted into a corner back in March of 2007. And they're giving us, and there's also that effect that they want us to have things, they want us to see these things after they're absolutely polished and perfect. So you go with nothing and nothing and nothing until you're almost like, forget it, this game is just never going to launch. And then they just inundate you with so much stuff you can't even process it.
Right, we saw that around. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, it just almost feels like a recipe for burnout to me at this point.
You think that the huge mass waves that we got during like PAX and things like that? I mean, it came in 2011. It really came around all the conventions. That's we get these mass, and every time it happened was when we were considering even starting up a show, and we'd get these massive amounts of news and all these cool videos, and we'd be like, we got to do a show. We've got so much to talk about, and then they just go totally quiet again.
Yeah, and then nothing.
Right.
So, I don't know. I think I can't even say. I hope that they'll be on an even keel maybe this year. I mean, once they get into real marketing and real promotion and real gearing up for launch, that we'll have something like SOTOR had on Fridays. I hope so.
Yeah, I think. I mean, they got to start in 2012. I mean, everybody's waiting. I mean, they've kind of got on record of almost saying it's going to come out in 2012 at some point, right? Who knows?
They have to.
I guess it does, but maybe it doesn't. Who knows? Maybe just ship it when it's done. I don't know. All right, next question. Josh Hagood wants to know. He says, "What's up with potions? When I first heard about Guild Wars 2 from a magazine reveal a while back, they mentioned some sort of cash shop potions. Those potions were supposedly a major deal, a central part of the game, and all players would want to get as many as they could. Have we heard anything about consumables in the in-game store?"
I think that was Odds Online.
Stop
No, I'm
that.
kidding.
Is there a 20? All of a sudden, the rumor starts as a $20. What was that? The $20 resurrection spell.
Ouch, that hurt. No, actually, what he's thinking of are energy potions, which were like one of the biggest brouhahas, I think, in Guild Wars 2 development. They had, there were several different kinds, like small energy potions, major energy potions, large, heavy energy potions, and energy was a factor in the game like it is in Guild Wars 2, or Guild Wars 1, and you could get these various ways, and there was it ended up just not fitting with what ArenaNet was wanting to do, and I honestly think that player reaction had a ton to do with it, because energy was eliminated from the game, as were the energy potions. So there's your answer to those potions. Those are not a thing anymore.
So what do we know about Cash Shop?
We don't.
We don't.
We know.
Well, what I think is we look at what Guild Wars 1 is doing right now. They're selling cosmetic items. They're selling storage slots. They're selling, character slots. They're selling plastic surgery, basically, where you could remake your character. Even gender changes, right? I mean, these are things that they're testing the waters on in Guild Wars 1, so I think they're going to have those in Guild Wars 2. But nothing's been confirmed, right?
Nothing's been confirmed, but if you look at the history of things, I mean, a lot of what we're seeing in Guild Wars 1 the past couple of years are things that we later learned have carried over in some form to Guild Wars 2.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me.
All right, next question. Chad Oliver says, how will skills be gained in the game? How many skill slots will a single character be limited to? And in addition, will we be able to somehow store multiple builds to be changed out in town, or will there be a way to respec? So first of all, how many skills in the game? How will skills be gained in the game?
Well, you get 10. You get 10 skills. 5 of them are linked to your weapon. Those are the 5 on the left. And then you have like some utility skills and such on the right-hand side of your bar. But you have 10. You can pretty much change them wherever. They also change according to your weapon. If you switch your weapon, you look down, your first 5 skills are completely different. You can gain skills a couple different ways, and I'm going to cheat and just read directly from my notes here. Weapon skills can be unlocked through killing enemies with a certain weapon, which is a system that I actually love. You get more proficient with this weapon the more you use it, and you learn fancier skills, and you learn better stuff as you use this weapon, which is pretty much how you do it in the real world.
Did they just automatically sort of appear that you've gotten the proficiency at this weapon and you got a new skill, or do you have to go to trainers? Do we know that?
You can see there's like a little box, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe this, but you can see there's almost like an indicator of how close you are to unlocking this. It almost looks like a little timer, and it expands as you use this weapon and as you get more proficient with it. So you can kind of see, okay, I'm about 3/4 of the way to learning this. I need to hit things with my greatsword more.
Sean, do we know anything about having sort of builds because a lot of people, in Guild Wars 1, especially like you'd have to build out your deck, so to speak, lock your abilities in, and you were kind of stuck with those at least until you were done with the encounter, correct?
Yeah, that's the way Guild Wars 1 is set up, and actually they made it. Eventually, they made it to the point where you could save the code, the build code, and you could trade codes. And you enter in this code, you copy paste it, and there's your build. As long as you have unlocked the skills, of course. In Guild Wars 2, though, it seems like it's going to be, like Ruby was saying, it's tied to different elements. The weapon, whatever weapon you have, that'll unlock certain skills. I don't want to say skill bar, because people get crazy when you say that, but the skills that you have there, plus there's racial skills, there's utility skills, and then there's your heals. And it also, if you go underwater, it changes all that. Everything changes. So it's like you have builds almost, but they're dependent on different elements that could be the same if you're playing the same class, the same weapon, same environment, same race, But other than that, they're all different, and I like that. I think that's a pretty cool way of doing it.
What about respecking? Is that really even exist here, or it's pretty much non-existent? It's just how you basically play stuff on your bar.
Well, again, that's just kind of not how it works.
That's what I'm saying. That doesn't seem like that's the way it works at all, right?
Yeah.
How does
there are just
it?
too many new factors involved where there's just not traditional respecking as you're thinking of it.
How so, for somebody who doesn't understand it?
Well, if you switch out your weapons, I guess technically you could call it respecking if you switch out your weapons and, okay, now I'm going to go pistol instead of, this great sword and this offhand. And as soon as you switch that out, you could call that respecking because you give yourself an entirely new skill set. Like Sean said, if you go underwater, I had actually forgotten about that. If you go underwater, there's like a whole new weapon set, and there are specific underwater skills and things. It adapts to your environment and your weapons that you're wielding to things that make sense for the environment and what you're holding. So it's much more fluid.
What about things like skill trees or stats? Are you building points into skill trees that can need to be respect or anything like that?
You mean as far as allocating kind of a point system into a tree?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, Ruby, have they talked about anything like that? I don't think they have. I think that's something that we see in every single other game.
Yeah, there's not a ton that we know about that.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Aaron Brokey wants to know, what do you think Guild Wars 2 can offer that games like WoW, SWTOR, and Rift don't already have other than no subscription? And do you think it will be enough to hold players' interest for months on end? Now, this is a big.
How long is the show?
Yeah, seriously.
I know,
here we go. I don't know. Let's pick one or two and go, Sean. I don't know.
Boy. Well, I think that's kind of the point. Is the whole game isn't like Rift and SWTOR and World of Warcraft. It's trying to not be those games. Dynamic events. That's a big one.
Yes.
The skill bar we just talked about. That's a huge one. It's kind of hard for people to wrap their heads around.
I got to play devil's advocate because I have heard people say dynamic events are nothing different than Rifts. I've heard people say that it looks to me that's the same thing as a Rift. What's the difference?
And public quests and Warhammer.
Right.
Yeah, that's what the fear is. The fear is usually like, well, it didn't work for Warhammer. People thought it would be great, but then you stand in a public quest all alone, and what are you going to do when you have to kill the big boss? I think that, and scalability is another thing. Rift has always talked about scalability of the rifts, and it's supposed to be the be-all, end-all, but it just doesn't work when you're just by yourself. So, I would like to see how ArenaNet does, which is essentially Public Quest version 3. It's learning from the mistakes of the last two times that developers have tried this, and hopefully making something that actually works this time. And scalability is a big part of that. We could do a whole show on this. This is such a big topic. But as far as it being something that's going to be different than the other two times, I kind of put my trust in ArenaNet, and kind of see what they have done with other aspects of the game, and hopefully they make dynamic events that big also, because they kind of have to. That's a big part.
How about you, Ruby? What do you think?
I think that dynamic events are what public quests wanted to be. And I'm not saying that, that's not anything against Warhammer. I'm not really ripping on Warhammer there. It's just that the technology and the time and development has changed since then, and this is what public quests should have been. The biggest difference to me between, I'm just going to take Rift as a comparison. In Rift, the game world is something that happens to you. I actually remember my first Rift. I was killing something for a quest. I was killing 10 of something, and a rift started to, there was a tear, and I was looking, and I had no idea what was going on. I was just, something's happened. Oh crap, this is a rift. This was just something that happened as I was standing there passively, and I could choose to participate in it. In Guild Wars 2, it's completely the other way around. You're actually in there, and you are something happening to the world. You have the control, and you have the choice to make things happen or not make them happen, as the case may be. If you don't feel like participating in, if you feel like telling this kid to leave you alone when she runs up to you and says that pirates are burning down her village, you can choose to tell her to go away.
Sure, but you could choose to, if you were in Rift and there was a rift to tear there, you could choose to just kind of like go around it and not engage in the rift. And you could say the same for, like, if I come across that dragon like coming out of the ocean there. I mean, I could choose probably to just turn around and not do that right now. So I admit that they're way cooler. I'm asking the questions because I'm trying to play devil's advocate for people who don't understand it to try and like figure it out, because I know a lot of people look at it and just go, oh, what's the difference? That dragon or a rift? What's the difference?
The thing is, like with Rift, if you don't do that Rift or you don't participate in the invasion that's going on, they're just going to stand around. Rift, the NPCs and the enemies will stand around circling each other in the Rift and not really do anything. In Guild Wars 2, it seems like they will take over that village, and that village will now be run by pirates.
Well, I mean, that's not Rift did have that. Rift did have zone invasions and had NPCs, running across the entire zone and taking over your towns, killing your quest givers. I'd come back and roll up on where I was supposed to turn in a quest, and they're dead.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of the part that they're taking from. It's not. I mean, we have to differentiate between rifts and invasions, which is a rift show, but I think that they're taking that invasion part. They're not so much the rift part. They're taking the invasion part, and they're kind of going off of that, and maybe even going on a larger scale. I mean, here I go. Ruby. You might want to cover your ears. In Tabula Rasa.
La 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 la.
I love Tabula Rasa.
They had that. The Bane would come down. They would take over cities, and and that's when I see this. What Guild Wars 2 is going to do. It's like that, it's kind of like that, except on a bigger scale and kind of more story-driven, it seems like.
It's going to be interesting. I can't wait to see how they do it. There's a lot of questions. And believe me, I'm only playing devil's advocate, and I'm so looking forward to see how they're doing. One thing I can say, and this is kind of just again, I think you kind of said the same thing, sort of, Sean, with it. You're putting your faith in ArenaNet, and I'm kind of doing the same thing only because they've already sort of set the bar of, like, they set the philosophy sort of behind the tone of ArenaNet from the first Guild Wars, that they really do set out to kind of do things differently. So that's what I'm sort of hoping. Like, everything that they're actually saying, some of it might be really nebulous and hard to understand. And, that sounds great. That's a great statement. But what does it really mean? We just got to hope that they back it up. And from what they did on the first Guild Wars, it seems like that's their driving force. I mean, that's sort of what makes ArenaNet different from other MMO companies out there, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, even if you look at what Guild Wars 1 did as far as grouping, a lot of people say it's not an MMO because there's not a persistent world, but you basically go to hubs, gather up, and then go out and do quests. And it's like Diablo 2, and actually the guys who worked on it worked on Diablo as well. But that now has become so popular. Look at all the MOBAs that are out there, essentially doing kind of the same thing. Guild Wars. There's Guild Wars. It kind of, I don't want to say they started it, but they popularized it, I guess. So they are on the right track. They have some great ideas. They know what people want, what they don't want, and how to kind of bridge that gap. So yeah, I know I sound like a complete fanboy, but I'll take that.
You'll take that. Kind of take it like a man. Take it like a man. All right, and last up, this question that we've got 897,643,269 gajillion times. Sam Vander Mortelli wants to know what classes we are going to play. So, Ruby, I'll start with you.
Elementals, then engineer. After that, I don't know.
Sean?
I love it.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Okay, Mesmer, right, first. Necromancer, I definitely want to do Engineer and Thief somewhere in there. They could be interchangeable.
All right, just everyone. All right, you're just going to name every class, aren't you, right now? You're just you're basically
to be fair, I think Guardian will be last.
Gotcha.
But I'll play
the Guardian doesn't do it for me either.
I'm probably gonna do Elementalist and Rogue. Thief. Sorry, they kind of look the two. They kind of look. I think Elementalist are probably my first ones. That's where I'm going with it. Sean Schuster.
Good taste.
Go to massively.com. EIC editor-in-chief, Pro Beard, Pro Slayer. Go to massively.com. Good to see you back again, buddy.
Thanks. Good to be here.
And Ruby, follow her on the Twitter at RUBI_. Don't forget the underscore, very important, at Ruby_. Of course, go over to check out Ruby on Massively as well. And you can follow me on Twitter, Gary Gannon, and come over to watch the live show of GuildCast. We do the show live every single Thursday right here on Gamebreaker.tv at 6 PST. Come over, hang out. Got lots of good stuff in 2012 coming, new website, all kinds of stuff. It's going to be crazy. Crazy amount of stuff coming. Can't wait to show it to you guys. Have a great weekend. Happy New Year to you all. And ArenaNet, give us some news. Or more viewer questions. I love your questions, though. They're fantastic. Have a great week, guys. See you next week.